So, you've understood that the three most common ways to structure sentences in sign language are subject, verb, object, object, subject, verb, and subject, object, verb. We can use any of these three without a problem. Of course, this mainly applies to short and simple sentences, but not always. Sometimes we come across longer and more complex ones. For example, in a writing language like Albanian, we might find a sentence like this one. The Army of the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima during World War II in 1945. That sentence is written in Albanian. Can you understand it? Probably yes. But let's change things a bit. Let's try doing it another way. Let's write it down in English this time. The exact same sentence. As we can see, when we write on a flat surface, we're drawing in two dimensions, right? It has height and width. In fact, all writing languages work in two dimensions. We can write on paper or on any flat surface, show it to someone, and they'll be able to understand it. But here's a question. Can some language also be represented on paper or on a flat surface? For example, if we write here a sentence in some language, just as we would in writing language, will the people be able to understand it? Let's take another example. Let's say we have a notebook here and I try to write some language, to draw it on paper, just as if it were a spoken or written language. Then I show it to a deaf person. Will it work? No. Why not? Well, as we've seen, written language are two-dimensional. They can be represented on paper. But sign language is a bit different. As we mentioned before, sign language is three-dimensional. It has height, width, and depth. In other words, it works in 3D, so to speak. Now then, let's move on to an example. Let's take the same sentence we mentioned earlier. All right? Can I copy that grammatical structure when signing? Let's try it. I'll do it sign by sign. Did you notice? I was just drawing random signs with no meaning. If a deaf person saw that, it will be very hard for them to build a clear mental image or understand what I am saying. Their head will explode. But why is it wrong? Because, as we already said, written languages are two-dimensional. I can't imitate their sequential grammar, since they can't exist on a flat surface. Sign language is different. To use it properly, we need to, so to speak, think like a deaf person when we sign. Now then, how can we do that? Let's see how it's worked when we respect the use of space. Back in 1945, the world was at war, the Second World War. And in a place called Hiroshima, the United States dropped an atomic bomb. Did you notice? That scene, that mental picture, is what allows a deaf person to truly visualize and understand the message. That's exactly my goal. They communicate effectively, just as deaf people do among themselves. It's as if I were painting and they're drawing direction with my eyes, showing the explosion and placing every element in its proper space. That way, the deaf person can clearly grasp what I am trying to express. So then, in this visual scene, what will the order be? First, I set the time. We say it in the years 1945. So, the first element in our structure is to determine whether the event is in the past, present, or future. Then comes the second element, the topic. We mentioned World War II. That gives us the theme. The third element, what will that be? The place or context. It could be a city, a country, or any location. The fourth structural point is the order. Whether it's subject, verb, object, object, subject, verb, or another variation. And finally, the fifth element is whether it's a question or not. This structure is something I can understand and use. But does that mean this will always be my rule from now on? No, careful. It's not about acting like robots and using it every single time. We need to stay flexible because this structure can and will change. Let's take the same sentence as an example. During the Second World War around the world, the United States dropped a bomb that exploded. And that happened in a place, in a city called Hiroshimë. The world event took place in 1945. If you notice, I changed the order, but it still makes sense. The structure shifted completely. So what does that tell us? It tells us that while the grammar order can vary, the spatial order, the way we position elements in space, that does not change. The visual spatial grammar must always be respected.